State Treasurer Dale Folwell visited Wilmington and voiced his concerns about transparency in local governments and boards.
Folwell says some of his concerns center around the administration at Fear Community College. Two members of the CFCC Board of Trustees were removed in the past year. One of them, Ray Funderburk, has filed a lawsuit against that board. WECT's Zach Solon talked with the treasurer today. Zach, Folwell says he's requested documents from CFCC related to transparency and the school's removal process.
Yeah, John, Treasurer Folwell says the trustees' vote to remove Ray Funderburk back in March raised questions to him about Fear Community College's administration. Now he wants to know more about what happened. Transparency in local government is top of mind for North Carolina Treasurer Dale Folwell.
All we're really interested in is the highest levels of transparency, the highest levels of competency, the highest levels of good government, and the highest levels of transparency as it relates to any conflicts that may go on.
As state treasurer, Folwell is a member of the State Board of Community Colleges. He has concerns about the Board of Trustees at Fear Community College. Board members voted to remove trustee Ray Funderburk in March after another member accused Funderburk of pressuring a teacher to change a student's grade. Funderburk denies that allegation and has since filed a lawsuit against the board, claiming his removal violated his right to free speech. As a state board member, Folwell says he's looking for more information about CFCC's removal process.
What we don't want is we do not want people removed from their positions because they ask a question. You know, the members of these boards of trustees, they have a fiduciary responsibility to ask questions.
This is not the first time Folwell has criticized a local board. As chairman of the Local Government Commission, he recently voted against the city of Wilmington's plan to buy the Thermo Fisher building downtown.
As the keeper of the public purse, the people at Cape Fear and New Hanover County, the city of Wilmington, they're also keepers of their purse also. And when people have questions about a process or personnel or money, they deserve to have those questions answered.
Answers that could come from a number of sources, from a memo, an email, or even a courtroom. I reached out to Fear Community College for comment on the treasurer's concerns, but I was told no one was available for an interview today. We'll keep you updated as Funderburk's lawsuit against the board moves forward. Zach Solon, WECT News.